My name is Wendy York, and I'm 28 years old. 3 weeks ago, I sat across from my father at Morton's Steakhouse, one of those places where the silverware costs more than my monthly grocery budget, and watched him announce, with actual pride in his voice, that he'd given my $10,000 wedding fund to my sister Sarah. Not borrowed, not delayed, given. Because, in his words, Sarah deserves a proper wedding. And well, you and Marcus can do something small. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat there frozen, while my family spent the next hour systematically tearing apart every choice I'd ever made. My career as a freelance graphic designer, my irresponsible finances, my fiancé Marcus, who they'd decided was just another broke tech guy with big dreams and no future. But then Marcus stood up. He pulled out his phone, looked directly at my father, and asked one question that made my sister's triumphant smile vanish like smoke. Do you want me to tell them what I actually do for a living? Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with this story. And if you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from and what time it is where you are. I'd love to know this story is reaching people all over the world. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, to how I ended up at that dinner, and why it changed everything. 6 months before that dinner, I was actually happy. Marcus and I had been together for 2 years, living in a small but cozy one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood my parents called transitional, and I called home. My workspace took up half our living room, 2 monitors, a professional drawing tablet, reference books stacked in careful towers against the wall. I loved my work. I designed brands for small businesses, logos for startups, marketing materials for people who were building something from nothing. The pay was inconsistent, sure, but I had a roster of loyal clients who came back again and again. I was making it work. Marcus was the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I loved that about him, but I didn't realize back then that he was always watching, always learning who people really were. When people asked what he did, he'd say, "I work in cybersecurity," and then change the subject. Simple, unassuming. He drove a modest sedan, wore jeans and button-downs, kept his hair neat but not expensive-looking. The most extravagant thing I'd noticed was his phone, an iPhone 15 Pro Max, and his laptop, a high-end MacBook Pro that seemed almost excessive for someone I assumed was an IT consultant. When I asked about it once, he'd smiled and said his company had good equipment budgets. I'd believed him. We were planning our wedding on what I'd saved, about $3,000, plus the $10,000 my father had promised years ago when Sarah and I were teenagers. He'd set aside funds for both his daughters' weddings, he'd said. Equal treatment. Fair. I should have known better. In my family, fair had always been a flexible concept, one that bent in Sarah's direction like a tree toward sunlight. Sarah had always been the golden child, and I had always been the other one, the one who needed to get it together. She'd graduated from Columbia Law, landed a position at Morrison and Foerster, one of the most prestigious corporate law firms in the city. She pulled in $180,000 a year, drove a Mercedes C-Class, carried a Hermes Birkin that our parents had gifted her for her 30th birthday. Every family gathering became a recap of her latest case victory, her recent bonus, her upcoming promotion. And me? I was the daughter who still hadn't found her footing. Never mind that I'd been supporting myself since college, that I had clients in 3 states, that I loved what I did. Freelancing wasn't a real career in my father's eyes. It was something you did while you figured out what you actually wanted to be. Why can't you be more stable, like your sister? My mother would ask, her voice soft with disappointment. When are you going to get serious about your future? My father would add, as though I was still a teenager experimenting with hobbies instead of a grown woman running a business. Sarah's boyfriend, Derek Langford, a vice president at a regional investment bank, only amplified the comparison. He wore Brioni suits and Hermes ties, talked about deals and portfolios with the casual confidence of someone who'd never questioned his own value. When Sarah had called 2 months ago to say she and Derek were getting serious, I'd felt a familiar twist in my stomach. I'd known somehow what was coming, but I'd pushed the thought away. This time would be different, I'd told myself. This time Marcus would be there. My family would see that I'd chosen someone solid, someone kind, someone who treated me like I mattered. I'd been so naive. When my father called to invite us to dinner to discuss wedding plans, I'd actually felt hopeful. Marcus squeezed my hand as we walked into Morton's Steakhouse on a Friday evening, the kind of place where the host checks your reservation like a bouncer at an exclusive club. The dining room glowed with warm amber light from brass fixtures. Dark wood panels lined the walls. The other diners wore cocktail dresses and tailored suits, their quiet conversations punctuated by the clink of crystal wine glasses. The air smelled like seared beef and money. My family was already seated at a corner table. Prime real estate, probably requested by my father, who loved these small displays of status. Dad wore his Patek Philippe watch, the one he'd bought after his retirement bonus from the insurance company. Mom had her Hermes Kelly bag, smaller and older than Sarah's Birkin, but still recognizable, resting on the chair beside her. Sarah looked polished in an Armani blazer, a substantial diamond engagement ring catching the light every time she moved her left hand. Derek sat beside her in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, his Hermes tie perfectly dimpled. And then there was Marcus, in a simple white button-down and khakis. Clean, presentable, but unmistakably ordinary compared to Derek's studied elegance. When we walked up, Sarah's eyes flicked over Marcus with barely concealed assessment. I saw her taking inventory, the off-the-rack shirt, the department store shoes, the absence of a designer watch. "Marcus," she said, her smile tight. "Good to see you again." "Sarah, Derek." Marcus nodded politely, pulling out my chair before taking his own seat. My father cleared his throat. "Well, now that we're all here, let's order first, then we can talk." I should have recognized the strategy. In my family, bad news always came after the appetizers. The interrogation started before our entrees arrived. "So, Wendy," my father began, slicing into his wedge salad with surgical precision, "how's the freelancing going? Any progress toward something more stable?" I set down my fork. "It's going well, actually. I just signed a 6-month contract with a sustainable fashion startup." "A startup?" Sarah laughed, not unkindly, but not kindly either. "Wendy, you know 90% of startups fail, right? I just handled a bankruptcy for one last month." "It's not about the stability of her clients," Derek interjected, dabbing his mouth with his napkin. "It's about building equity, a salary, benefits, a 401k. Freelancing is fine for your 20s, but at a certain point—" He trailed off, letting the implication hang. Marcus said nothing, but I noticed his jaw tighten slightly. His phone, face down on the table, lit up briefly with a notification. I caught a glimpse of the preview. Board meeting reminder, Q4 review. The screen went dark before I could read more. "And Marcus," my father continued, turning his attention like a spotlight. "Wendy mentioned you work in cybersecurity. What exactly does that entail?" "I handle data protection for businesses," Marcus said simply. "Threat assessment, breach prevention, system architecture." Sarah leaned forward. "That's interesting. What company?" "A smaller firm," Marcus replied. "We work with various clients." "Small firm." Derek nodded slowly, his tone suggesting he'd just confirmed a suspicion. "Well, at least you're employed. In this economy, that's something." My mother, who'd been quiet, finally spoke. "We're just concerned about Wendy's future. You understand, Marcus. We want to know she'll be taken care of." I wanted to argue that I could take care of myself, but my father was already moving on to the real agenda. "Which brings us to the wedding." My father set down his knife and fork with ceremonial finality. He folded his hands on the table, and I recognized the posture, the same one he'd used when he'd told me I couldn't study art in college, that I needed something practical. "Your mother and I have given this a lot of thought," he began, "and we've made a decision about the wedding funds." My stomach dropped. Sarah and Derek got engaged last week. He smiled at them, genuine warmth lighting his face. We're absolutely thrilled. Derek is exactly the kind of man we'd hoped Sarah would find. Successful, stable, from a good family. Sarah beamed, holding up her ring so the diamond threw fractured light across the tablecloth. We're looking at the Plaza Resort for next June. They have this incredible ballroom. Which brings us to the money, Dad continued. We've decided to give the $10,000 to Sarah for her wedding. The words didn't process at first. I stared at him, waiting for the qualifier, the "but we'll still help you" or "so we'll split it differently." It didn't come. Wait, I finally managed. You're giving all of it to Sarah? Wendy. My father's voice took on that patient, explaining to a child tone I'd heard my entire life. Sarah deserves a proper wedding. She's worked incredibly hard to build her career. She's marrying someone who can provide for her. They deserve a celebration that reflects their standing. And what about me? My voice cracked. You promised. You and Marcus can do something small, Mom interjected gently. Something intimate. A ceremony at a park, maybe. That can be lovely too, sweetie, in its own way. Something appropriate for your situation, Derek added, his smile condescending. No shame in knowing your limits. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand, a gesture that might have looked sisterly to an observer, but I felt the slight pressure of her ring against my fingers, deliberate as a period at the end of a sentence. I know this is hard to hear, she said, but think about it practically. Derek and I have combined incomes of over $300,000. Our wedding will be attended by partners from my firm, executives from his bank. The Plaza Resort makes sense for us. For you. She glanced at Marcus, then back to me. Something smaller just makes more sense. Plus, Derek added, you've never been great with money, right? Wendy, didn't you borrow $500 from your parents last year to cover rent? My face burned. I had borrowed it once, when 2 clients had delayed payment simultaneously. I'd paid it back within 6 weeks. That's different, I started. Is it? My father leaned back, his Patek Philippe catching the light as he crossed his arms. Wendy, your mother and I love you, but we have to be realistic. You're 28 years old, still living in a rented apartment, working a job without benefits or security, about to marry a man whose career prospects are unclear. Marcus had been silent through all of this, but now I felt him shift beside me. His hand, resting on the table, curled slowly into a fist, then deliberately relaxed. We're not trying to hurt you, Mom said softly. We just want what's best. And Sarah has made choices that position her for a certain kind of life. You've made different choices. You mean worse choices, I said flatly. No one contradicted me. I looked at Marcus, ready to apologize for dragging him into this, ready to suggest we just leave. But when I met his eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. Calm. Absolute, determined calm. Wendy, we need you to be mature about this, my father said. We need you to say you understand, right now, so we can move forward and enjoy our meal. The restaurant hummed around us, the murmur of other families, probably having normal conversations, probably not being asked to publicly accept their own humiliation. Sarah was already pulling out her phone, scrolling through what looked like Pinterest boards. Look, if you want, I can lend you my maid of honor dress from my law school roommate's wedding. It's Vera Wang. Still beautiful, you could wear it. Or just do a courthouse ceremony, Derek suggested, cutting his steak. Simple, efficient, cheap, nothing wrong with that. My mother's eyes were glistening, but she didn't speak, didn't defend me, just sat there, looking vaguely pained, as though she was witnessing something unfortunate but inevitable, like a car with expired insurance getting towed. I felt tears pressing behind my eyes, my throat ached. Every instinct screamed at me to say I understand, just to make it stop, just to get out of this restaurant and never speak to any of them again. I opened my mouth, and Marcus stood up, not dramatically, not angrily. He simply rose from his chair with the unhurried grace of someone who'd made a decision and was now executing it. The motion drew every eye at the table. My father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Sarah's phone scrolling stopped. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Not frantically, not defensively, but with the casual confidence of someone about to clarify a simple misunderstanding. He looked directly at my father. "I have a question before Wendy answers you," Marcus said, his voice quiet, but carrying the kind of authority that made the air change. "Do you want me to tell everyone what I actually do for a living?" Derek laughed, actually laughed, a sharp, derisive sound that made the couple at the next table glance over. "Oh, here we go," he said, setting down his wine glass. "The big reveal. Let me guess, you're actually really important? You're an entrepreneur?" He made air quotes, his cufflinks glinting. "Everyone calls themselves an entrepreneur these days," Sarah smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Marcus, you don't need to impress us. We're just trying to understand what Wendy's future looks like. That's reasonable, isn't it?" My father's face had settled into an expression I knew well, patient condescension. "Son, we're not trying to attack you. We just want to know you can provide for our daughter. It's a father's prerogative." "Marcus, you don't have to," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. He held up one hand gently, a silent request for me to wait. Then he turned his phone screen toward the table. "I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Vault Solutions," he said calmly. "We're a cybersecurity company that provides data protection services for enterprise clients." Silence. Then Derek snorted. "CEO? That's a nice title. What's the company, 5 employees working out of a WeWork?" "127 full-time employees," Marcus replied without inflection. "Our main office is in the financial district. We also have satellite offices in Austin and Denver." Sarah's smirk faltered slightly. "I've never heard of Cloud Vault." "You wouldn't have unless you work in enterprise security or government contracting," Marcus said. "Our clients include 17 Fortune 500 companies and 3 federal agencies. We prefer to maintain a low profile. Security firms that advertise too loudly tend to become targets themselves." My father's fork had stopped moving entirely now. "Government contracts," he repeated slowly. "That sounds ambitious." "It is," Marcus agreed. Marcus tapped his phone twice and turned it toward Derek. "That's our Series C funding announcement from last month. Forbes covered it." Derek leaned forward, squinting at the screen. I watched the color drain from his face as he read. He reached for the phone, then stopped himself, as though remembering it wasn't his to touch. Sarah grabbed the phone instead, her manicured nails clicking against the case. Her eyes scanned the article, moving faster, then slower. She looked up at Marcus, then back at the screen. "This says," she swallowed. "This says Cloud Vault was valued at $47 million. My mother made a small sound. My father sat frozen, his face unreadable. Derek's jaw worked silently before he managed. "Anyone can write an article. Anyone can—" "You can verify it," Marcus said, retrieving his phone and pulling up another screen. "Here's our business registration with the Delaware Secretary of State. Here's our DUNS number. Here's our page on Crunchbase with our full funding history." He scrolled, each tap deliberate. Series A, 12 million. Series B, 18 million. Series C, 23 million, led by Sequoia Capital. He turned the phone to show a professional business card, digital but clearly legitimate. "Marcus Thorne, Chief Executive Officer and Founder, Cloud Vault Solutions." Sarah's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. She set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. "If you'd like additional verification," Marcus continued, his voice still perfectly level, "my attorney is actually having dinner here tonight. He's sitting 3 tables over." He gestured subtly toward a distinguished man in his 50s, working on a laptop at a corner table. "Lawrence Kemp, from Morris and Kemp LLP. I can ask him to come over if you need a witness who can confirm our corporate structure and valuation." The man looked up, caught Marcus's eye, and nodded slightly in acknowledgement. "Wait." My father finally found his voice, though it came out rougher than usual. You've been. You've known Wendy for 2 years. You've met us multiple times. You never said. No, Marcus agreed. I didn't. Sarah's hands were trembling slightly as she folded them on the table. You let us think. You deliberately. I deliberately didn't correct your assumptions, Marcus said. When Wendy first introduced me to you, I told you I worked in cybersecurity. That was true. You assumed it meant I was an IT support technician or a consultant. I didn't contradict you because I wanted to see something. See what? My mother's voice was barely audible. Marcus looked at me, and his expression softened for the first time that evening. Then he turned back to my parents. I wanted to see how you would treat Wendy and me when you thought we weren't successful by your standards, when you thought she'd chosen someone who couldn't provide the lifestyle you wanted for her. He paused. I spent 2 years watching, coming to your family dinners, listening to the comments about Wendy's career, her choices, her future, hearing the comparisons to Sarah. That's manipulative, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. No, Marcus replied calmly. That's observation. I didn't manipulate anyone. I simply existed as myself and let you show me who you were. He placed both hands flat on the table, his posture radiating quiet authority. And tonight, I've seen exactly who you are. You're people who measure worth by income statements and job titles. People who would take away a promised wedding fund from one daughter and give it to another, not because she needs it, but because you think she deserves it more. Now, wait just a minute, my father started. I'm not finished, Marcus said. Marcus pulled up his email app and handed me his phone. Wendy, would you read the top message? My hands shook as I took it. The email header read, Confirmed. Ashford Estate Booking, York Thorne Wedding. I opened it. It's from. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again. It's from Elise Chen at Ashford Estate Events. Read it out loud, Marcus said gently. Please. I did, my voice growing steadier with each word. Dear Mr. Thorne, we are delighted to confirm your booking of the Ashford Estate for Saturday, June 14th for the York Thorne wedding. As discussed, your package includes exclusive use of the Grand Ballroom and Gardens, capacity 200, 12-piece chamber orchestra led by Maestro Richard Castellano, floral design by Florence De Luca, 5-course plated dinner prepared by Chef Guillaume Bertrand, 2 Michelin stars, premium open bar with sommelier service, professional photography and videography by Sarah Jameson Studios. The list went on and on. When I reached the bottom, I could barely breathe. Total investment, $78,000. Deposit paid in full, balance due 30 days prior to event. I looked up at Marcus. When did you? 6 weeks ago, he said. I was waiting for the right time to surprise you. I'd planned to tell you this weekend, actually. Take you to see the estate. His jaw tightened. But then your father called about this dinner, and I realized I needed you to see this. All of it. Sarah had gone completely still, her face frozen in an expression somewhere between shock and horror. Derek was staring at his plate like he wished he could disappear into it. My mother had tears running down her face. My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. We didn't. If you'd told us. If I'd told you, Marcus interrupted, then you would have treated Wendy better because of my money, not because she deserves respect as a human being. I need to pause here for a moment, because if you've ever sat at a table feeling like you weren't enough, like you'd never be enough, in the eyes of people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, you understand what I felt in that moment. If this story resonates with you, please leave a comment. Tell me about a time you had to set boundaries with family. You're not alone in this. And if you're finding value in this story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Because what happened next showed me something I'd never understood before. Let me continue. My father's face had turned a mottled red. Now listen here. We couldn't have known. You purposely deceived us. I told you the truth, Marcus said, his voice still level but harder now, like steel beneath velvet. Every word I said was accurate. I work in cybersecurity. I do handle data protection. I never lied. You simply decided that because I didn't drive a Mercedes or wear a Rolex, I must not be worth your respect. We were trying to protect Wendy, my mother said, her voice breaking. We didn't want her to struggle. You weren't protecting her, Marcus cut in. You were punishing her for not fitting your definition of success. Sarah finally found her voice. This is insane. We love Wendy. We were just being practical. Anyone would have. Would have what? Marcus leaned forward slightly. Would have stolen a promised wedding fund from their daughter and given it to the one they're more proud of? No, Sarah. Not anyone. Just you. Stolen is a strong word, Derek interjected weakly. It's their money. They can do what they want. Marcus turned to him with an expression of such concentrated disdain that Derek physically flinched. And who are you in this conversation? Marcus asked quietly. The man who just told my fiancé there's no shame in knowing your limits? The man who suggested she get married at a courthouse because she's not worth a real ceremony? Derek's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, pulling out his wallet and placing $300 bills on the table. That should cover our portion of this meal. Wendy and I are leaving. You're going to sit here and think very carefully about what kind of people you want to be. I'd been silent through most of this, shock keeping my voice trapped in my throat. But now, something broke loose inside me. I stood up. I've spent 28 years trying to be good enough for you, I said, my voice shaking but clear. Good enough for Dad to look at me the way he looks at Sarah. Good enough for Mom to brag about me to her friends. Good enough to deserve the same love you give my sister without having to earn it. My father reached toward me. Wendy, sweetheart. Don't. I stepped back. I'm not finished. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't wipe them away. Let them see. Let them all see what they'd done. Dad, you didn't give that money to Sarah because she needs it. She makes almost $200,000 a year. You gave it to her because you're proud of her, and you've never been proud of me. Because I chose art over law. Because I chose independence over a corporate ladder. Because I didn't become the daughter you wanted. That's not true, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It is true. I turned to my mother. And you let it happen. Every time Dad compared me to Sarah, every time he dismissed my work, every time he made me feel small, you just stood there. You never defended me, not once. Mom was openly crying now. Wendy, I'm so sorry. I don't need your apology right now, I said. I need you to know that I'm done. I'm done trying to prove myself to people who've already decided I'm not worth their respect. I looked at Sarah, who couldn't meet my eyes. I won't be at your wedding, I told her. And you won't be invited to mine. Marcus stood and placed his hand on the small of my back. Gentle, grounding. We're leaving now. Wendy, wait. Sarah reached for my arm. I pulled away. Don't touch me. We can talk about this, she pleaded. We can figure this out. There's nothing to figure out, I said. You made your choice. Now live with it. Marcus guided me toward the exit, his presence solid beside me. As we passed the table where his attorney sat, the distinguished man looked up and caught Marcus's eye. Mr. Kemp, Marcus said with a slight nod. Marcus. The attorney's voice was warm. I trust everything is proceeding as expected? Perfectly, Marcus replied. I'll call you Monday about sending the formal documentation. Of course, Ms. York. He nodded to me respectfully. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding. I managed a shaky thank you before Marcus led me outside. The cool evening air hit my face like a blessing. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing deeply, trying to process what had just happened. Behind us, through the restaurant's large windows, I could see my family still sitting at the table. My mother with her face in her hands, My father staring at nothing, Sarah and Derek in what looked like an intense whispered conversation. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked softly. I looked at him. This man I'd thought I knew, who'd just revealed himself to be someone entirely different, while somehow remaining exactly the same person I'd fallen in love with. "I don't know," I admitted. "Ask me later." His car, I noticed for the first time, wasn't the modest sedan I'd been imagining. It was a Tesla Model S, sleek and black, parked in premium spot near the entrance. Of course it was. Marcus opened the passenger door for me. "Let's go home." The Tesla's interior was silent except for the soft hum of the electric motor. Leather seats, panoramic glass roof, a dashboard that looked like something from a spaceship. I'd ridden in this car dozens of times and somehow never processed what it meant. How had I been so blind? "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally asked, my voice small in the darkness. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, but I saw his hands tighten slightly on the steering wheel. "About Cloud Vault? About everything. The company, the money, the $47 million, Marcus. That's not exactly a minor detail." He was quiet for a long moment, navigating through the city traffic with the ease of someone who'd driven these streets 1,000 times. "I needed you to see them clearly," he finally said. "If I'd told you at the beginning, or even 6 months ago, you would have doubted. You would have wondered if your family might be right, if maybe they were just concerned about finances and would change their minds once they knew I was successful. But, and they would have changed," Marcus continued. "The moment they knew I had money, they would have been warm and welcoming. Your father would have clapped me on the back and called me son. Your mother would have seated me at the head of the table. Sarah would have suddenly wanted double dates." I knew he was right. I hated it, but I knew. "But it wouldn't have been real," I whispered. "No, it wouldn't have been real." He glanced at me, his eyes soft in the dashboard's glow. "I needed you to see that their rejection wasn't about me being unsuccessful. It was about their values, about how they measure human worth. And I needed you to see it so clearly that you could never doubt yourself again." "Tell me about Cloud Vault," I said, "the real story." Marcus merged onto the highway, the city lights streaking past us. "I started it 6 years ago, right out of my master's program at MIT, just me and 2 friends from school, working out of a cramped apartment in Cambridge. We saw a gap in the market, small to mid-sized companies that needed enterprise-level security but couldn't afford the big firms." 6 years, I repeated. "We've been together for 2. By the time I met you, we'd already gone through Series A funding and had 60 employees. We were growing fast, almost too fast. I was working 80-hour weeks, sleeping in my office, living on coffee and stress. I tried to picture it and couldn't. The Marcus I knew was calm, present, never rushed. That's why I started pulling back," he continued. "I hired a strong executive team, delegated operations, created systems so the company could run without me micromanaging every decision. I wanted a life, not just a business." "And then you met me." "And then I met you." His voice softened. "At that coffee shop in Brooklyn, remember? You were working on a logo design for that bakery, and you had marker stains on your fingers." I did remember. I'd knocked over his coffee when I'd reached for my pencil case. I'd been so mortified, apologizing profusely while he'd just laughed and helped me clean up. "I told you I worked in cybersecurity and you asked if I liked it," Marcus said. "Not what I made, not what my title was, not whether it was prestigious. You asked if I liked it. You were the first person in 3 years who'd asked me that." My phone buzzed. Then again, then a third time. I pulled it out. 17 messages. Sarah, my mother, even my father. I turned it off. "What did your attorney mean about formal documentation?" I asked. Marcus pulled into our apartment complex parking garage. Except now I noticed it wasn't our usual spot on level 3. He had a reserved space on level 1, right by the elevator. A placard read, "Reserved Thorn." Lawrence is going to send your family an official communication, Marcus said, putting the car in park. It will include verification of Cloud Vault's status, articles of incorporation, our DUNS number, links to the Forbes and TechCrunch articles, my LinkedIn profile. Everything that proves tonight wasn't a bluff. Why? I asked. Why go through all that? He turned to face me fully. Because they're going to wake up tomorrow morning and convince themselves it was an exaggeration. Your father will decide I was exaggerating the company's value. Sarah will tell herself I was showing off with fake documents. They'll rationalize it, dismiss it, and in a week they'll be back to treating you exactly the same way. The certainty in his voice sent a chill through me. But if they receive official documentation from a law firm, not from me, but from an independent third party, they can't pretend. They'll have to face what they did. And the wedding details? I asked. Why include those? Marcus reached over and took my hand. Because I want them to know, to really, deeply know, that you're having the wedding of your dreams. Not because I'm trying to show off, but because you deserve it. Every flower, every note of music, every perfectly cooked meal. You deserve all of it. Marcus, I couldn't find words. There's one more thing in the letter, he said quietly. A condition. What condition? If any of them want to attend our wedding, they have to send you a handwritten letter of apology, a real one, explaining exactly what they're apologizing for and how they plan to change. We rode the elevator to our apartment in silence. Marcus unlocked the door. Our modest one-bedroom that suddenly felt different, like I was seeing it for the first time. The expensive equipment made sense now. The quality furniture I'd thought we'd gotten on sale. The rent for a place in a neighborhood that was transitional, only if you weren't paying attention to the Tesla parking garage and the organic grocery store on the corner. I turned my phone back on. The messages flooded in. Sarah. Wendy, we need to talk. Please call me. Sarah. I know you're upset, but you're being unreasonable. Sarah. How could you embarrass us like that in public? Mom. Sweetheart, please answer. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Mom. I know I should have said something. I know I should have protected you. Mom. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? Just us? Dad. Wendy. I think we all need to sit down and discuss the situation calmly. Dad. Your mother is very upset. You need to call her. Dad. We're your parents. We deserve respect even when we make mistakes. I read them aloud to Marcus, who was making tea in our small kitchen. He didn't turn around, just kept filling the kettle. Notice anything? He asked. I read them again. Sarah hasn't actually apologized. Dad thinks this is about him deserving respect. Only Mom. I paused. Only Mom said she was sorry. Your mom feels guilty, Marcus said, bringing 2 mugs to the coffee table. Your dad feels disrespected, and Sarah feels humiliated. Should I respond? Not tonight. He settled beside me on the couch. Tonight, you rest. Tomorrow, after you've had time to think clearly, you decide what you want to do. Not what they want, not what I want, what you want. 1 week later, Lawrence Kemp sent the email. I'd spent that week in a strange fog, working on client projects, avoiding calls, reading and rereading my family's messages without responding. Marcus had been patient, present, but not pushy, making sure I ate and slept and didn't spiral into the self-doubt that had been my constant companion for 28 years. When the email went out, Marcus forwarded me a copy. From Lawrence Kemp, Escrella, Morris and Kemp, LLP. To Robert York, Linda York, Sarah York. Subject: clarification regarding Marcus Thorne. Professional credentials and wedding details. Dear Mr. and Mrs. York, and Ms. Sarah York, I am writing on behalf of my client, Marcus Thorne, to provide formal verification of information discussed at your family dinner on date. Professional verification. Mr. Thorne is the founder and chief executive officer of Cloud Vault Solutions, Inc., a Delaware C corporation specializing in enterprise cybersecurity. The company's credentials include DUNS, number, federal tax ID, number, current valuation, $47 million, Series C, October 2024. Employee count, 127 full-time. Client portfolio, 17, Fortune 500 companies, 3 federal agency contracts. Attached you will find Articles of Incorporation, Forbes article, October 15, 2024. TechCrunch coverage, October 18, 2024. And Mr. Thorne's LinkedIn profile, verified, 14,200 plus connections. Wedding details. Mr. Thorne has arranged a wedding celebration for Ms. Wendy York at Ashford Estate on June 14, 2025. Total investment, $78,000. This has been fully funded by Mr. Thorne personally. Regarding attendance, Mr. Thorne and Ms. York are extending invitations on the following condition. Any family member wishing to attend must submit a handwritten letter of apology to Ms. York by May 1, 2025. This letter must specifically address 1. What actions, words you are apologizing for. 2. How those actions affected Ms. York. 3. What steps you will take to change your behavior going forward. This is not meant as punishment, but as an opportunity for genuine healing and reconciliation. The couple believes family relationships should be built on mutual respect, not financial obligation. Respectfully, Lawrence Kemp, Escrane. Mom's letter arrived within 3 days. It was written on her personal stationery, cream-colored paper with her initials embossed at the top, and ran 3 pages in her careful teacher's handwriting. Dear Wendy, I've been writing and rewriting this letter for 2 days, throwing away draft after draft because nothing seems adequate for what I need to say. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. I'm sorry for every time your father compared you to Sarah and I stayed silent. I'm sorry for every dismissive comment about your career that I let slide. I'm sorry for not defending you, not protecting you, not standing up for you the way a mother should. You asked me at that dinner why I just stood there, and you were right. I've always stood there. I let your father's voice become the loudest in the house, and I let Sarah's achievements become the measure by which everything else was judged. I convinced myself I was keeping the peace, but I was really just taking the easy path. You deserved better. You deserved a mother who saw your talent, your independence, your kindness, your strength. You deserved a mother who celebrated you for who you are, not who I wished you would be. I don't know if I can change completely. I'm 58 years old, and I've been this person for a long time. But I want to try. I want to learn to speak up. I want to learn to see you clearly, to appreciate the remarkable woman you've become, despite growing up in a house that didn't nurture your gifts. I love you. I have always loved you, even when I failed to show it in the ways that mattered. If you'll let me, I'd like to try to be the mother you deserved all along. Love, Mom. I cried when I read it, not the bitter tears from the restaurant, but something softer, sadder, and maybe, just maybe, hopeful. Sarah didn't send a letter. She showed up at my apartment 2 weeks after the email, unannounced. I almost didn't let her in. My hand was on the door, holding it only half open, when she said, "Please, 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She walked into our living room looking diminished somehow, despite her Burberry trench coat and her perfect hair. She stood awkwardly by the couch, not sitting until I gestured tersely for her to do so. "I can't write that letter," she said without preamble. "Then you can't come to the wedding." "Wendy, that's not fair. We're sisters. Family doesn't abandon each other." "You're right," I interrupted. "Family doesn't abandon each other. But you did. Repeatedly." She flinched. I didn't realize." "Didn't realize what? That I had feelings? That constantly being compared to you was destroying me? That taking my wedding fund would hurt me?" "Dad made that decision, and you accepted it, happily." I kept my voice level, channeling Marcus's calm. "You didn't say, 'Dad, that's not right.' You didn't say Wendy deserves that money too. You said thank you. and started planning your plaza wedding. Sarah's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the redness creeping up her neck. You're really going to make me grovel? Write some humiliating letter like I'm a child being punished? It's not about humiliation, I said quietly. It's about accountability. It's about you actually understanding what you did and why it was wrong. But you don't, do you? Even now you think this is about your pride. I'm not going to apologize in writing like some kind of criminal, she said, standing. That's ridiculous. We're adults. Then I guess we're done here. She stared at me, waiting for me to back down the way I always had. I didn't. Dad's response came via email, not a handwritten letter. Subject: apology. Requirement: Wendy. I've given this situation considerable thought. I apologize if you felt hurt by our family discussion about the wedding funds. That was never our intention. Your mother and I were simply trying to make a practical decision based on the information we had available at the time. However, I must say that I'm troubled by the way this has been handled. Requiring a written apology as a condition of attending your wedding is frankly manipulative. It feels like punishment rather than reconciliation. I'm your father, and while I may have made a mistake in judgment, I deserve to be treated with respect. I think what would be more productive is if we all sat down together, you, me, your mother, Sarah, and Marcus, and discuss this like mature adults. We can move past this misunderstanding and rebuild our relationship without these kinds of ultimatums. I'm willing to forget the embarrassment at Morton's if you're willing to reconsider these harsh conditions you've set. Let me know when you're ready to talk reasonably. Dad. I read it twice, then showed it to Marcus. If you felt hurt, Marcus read aloud, I'm willing to forget the embarrassment. Not one genuine apology in the entire message. He still doesn't understand, I said, feeling simultaneously sad and relieved. He thinks this is about ego, about control, about who deserves respect. Do you want to respond? I thought about it for a long moment, then typed a single sentence. The letter must be handwritten and must meet the requirements Lawrence outlined. Those conditions stand. I didn't sign it love or your daughter, just sent it. Dad didn't reply. Derek, predictably, sent nothing at all. Within a month, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Sarah had ended their relationship. Apparently, he didn't want to get involved in family drama. I want to pause here again, because this is where so many of us struggle. When family refuses to take accountability, when they turn their hurt into anger and their guilt into defensiveness, it's tempting to give in. To say, fine, it's not worth it, and accept the same treatment you've always received. If you've ever had to hold a boundary with family, really hold it, even when they fought back, please share your story in the comments. How did you find the strength? And if this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next taught me that boundaries aren't walls, they're foundations for something better. Let me continue with how my life changed after that decision. Something shifted in me after I stopped waiting for my family's approval. My client work, which had always been solid, suddenly flourished. I wasn't sure if I was working better or just worrying less, but projects that used to take me days now flowed in hours. A sustainable fashion startup I'd done branding for referred me to 2 other companies. Then those companies referred me to others. Within a month, I had a waiting list. You're more confident, Marcus observed one evening, watching me finalize a logo design. You're making decisions faster, not second-guessing yourself. He was right. I'd spent so much energy trying to prove my worth to people who would never see it that I'd been undermining my own work. Now, freed from that weight, I was designing the way I'd always wanted to. Bold, instinctive, unapologetic. One of my new clients was a woman named Jenna Martinez, who'd founded a nonprofit helping other women start freelance businesses. I love your style, she told me during our kickoff call. It's authentic. It doesn't try to be something it's not. The comment made me pause. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. Would you ever consider teaching? Jenna asked. We're always looking for people to do workshops on branding and design. I've never thought about it, I admitted. Think about it, she encouraged. You have a gift, and you have a story. Women need to hear from people like you, people who chose their own path despite pressure to be someone else. After the call, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at my portfolio. 12 years of work, hundreds of projects, all of it done my way, on my terms, even when people told me I should be doing something else. Maybe I did have something to teach. Planning the wedding with Marcus was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd pictured months of stress, budget spreadsheets, compromises, and cuts. Instead, our meeting with Elise at Ashford Estate felt like stepping into a dream I hadn't known I was allowed to have. The estate sat on 40 acres of manicured grounds in Connecticut, a 45-minute drive from the city. The main house dated back to 1887, all stone and leaded glass and history. The grand ballroom had soaring ceilings with crystal chandeliers, French doors that opened onto terraced gardens, and an intimacy despite its size. This is where you'll have your first dance, Elise explained, walking us through the space. The chamber orchestra will be set up here. Florence typically places the dramatic arrangements, the tall centerpieces, around the perimeter, with lower garden roses on the tables so guests can see each other. I could barely process it. Florence DeLuca is really doing our flowers? She is, Marcus confirmed, squeezing my hand. I showed her some of your design work. She said any woman with that eye for color and composition would appreciate her vision. Marcus, this is too much. It's not, he said firmly. This is what you deserve. This is what I want to give you. 3 weeks later, Mom asked if she could come see the venue. I'd been texting with her, short messages at first, then gradually longer. She'd asked about my work, about wedding plans, about how I was feeling. She never made excuses for Dad or Sarah. She just listened. I'd like that, I told her. Just you, though, not just me, she confirmed quickly. I understand. When she walked into the Ashford Estate ballroom and saw what Marcus had arranged, she cried, "Oh, Wendy, oh, sweetheart, it's perfect, it's absolutely perfect." You really think so? I think you're going to be the most beautiful bride, she said, hugging me tightly, and I'm so honored you're letting me be there. June 14th arrived with cloudless blue skies and morning sunshine that turned the Ashford Estate gardens golden. I woke up in the bridal suite, a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking rose gardens that Florence's team had been enhancing since dawn. My wedding dress hung on a padded hanger by the window. Silk charmeuse, clean lines, delicate lace at the shoulders. I'd sketched the design myself, then worked with a dressmaker in Brooklyn to bring it to life. Simple, elegant, mine. Jenna arrived at 9 to help me get ready. She'd become a close friend over the past months, and when I'd asked her to be my maid of honor, she'd cried. I'd be honored, she'd said. Truly honored. Mom arrived at 10 carrying a small box. These were my mother's, she said, opening it to reveal pearl earrings. I wore them at my wedding. Sarah wore them at, well, I'd like you to have them, if you want them. I put them on. They're perfect. By noon, 80 guests had arrived, friends, colleagues, a few of Marcus's business partners, Jenna's nonprofit community. People who actually cared about us, people who'd chosen to be there, not out of obligation, but out of love. Sarah's absence felt like relief, not loss. Dad's absence felt expected. Sad, maybe, but not surprising. At 1:30, the chamber orchestra began playing. Jenna handed me my bouquet, garden roses, peonies, and sweet peas in soft blush and cream tones. Ready? She asked. I looked down the aisle toward Marcus, who stood at the altar watching me with an expression of pure joy. Ready, I said, walking down that aisle, past friends who smiled and cried, past my mother who clutched her tissue with both hands, past flower arrangements that belonged in a museum. I felt something I'd rarely experienced in my life. Certainty. Marcus took my hands when I reached him, and the officiant began. But I barely heard the traditional words. I was too focused on Marcus's face, on the way he was looking at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. When it was time for our personal vows, Marcus went first. "Wendy," he said, his voice steady but emotional, "I promise to always see you, not through anyone else's eyes, not through society's definitions of success, but through my own heart. You are the most extraordinary person I've ever known, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Your creativity, your resilience, your capacity to love even when you weren't loved the way you deserved. I promise to spend every day of our life together making sure you know your worth." I was crying before he finished. When it was my turn, I somehow managed to speak. "Marcus, you taught me that love isn't something I have to earn. You showed me that I was always enough, that I was always worthy, even when I couldn't see it myself. You gave me the greatest gift anyone's ever given me, the courage to choose myself. I promise to love you with that same unconditional acceptance. I promise to see you. I promise to choose you every single day." We exchanged rings, simple platinum bands, engraved with our wedding date. "I now pronounce you married," the officiant said, beaming. "You may kiss." And we did. The reception was everything I'd never let myself dream of. Chef Guillaume's five-course meal was art on plates: seared scallops with saffron beurre blanc, wagyu beef with truffle reduction, microgreens that tasted like concentrated summer. Guests kept exclaiming over each course, and I found myself laughing with pure joy. The cake, 5 tiers of champagne and elderflower, decorated with fresh flowers that matched my bouquet, was almost too beautiful to cut. "Almost," Marcus whispered, handing me the cake knife. During dinner, Jenna stood to give a toast. "I've known Wendy for less than a year," she said, "but in that time, I've watched her transform. Not because she changed who she was, but because she finally stopped apologizing for it. She's the most talented designer I know, and more importantly, she's one of the best people I know. Marcus, you're a lucky man." "I know," Marcus said, raising his glass to me. Later, Mom approached our table. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside me. "Of course." She sat, smoothing her dress, a simple but elegant navy sheath that she'd clearly chosen with care. "I want you to know," she said quietly, "that this is the most beautiful wedding I've ever been to. Not because of the venue or the food or the flowers, though they're all stunning, but because it's real. Because everyone here loves you both for who you actually are." "Thank you, Mom," I said, meaning it. "Thank you," she replied, "for giving me another chance." The letter came 3 days into our honeymoon in Tuscany. Marcus and I were staying at a converted villa in the Chianti region, surrounded by vineyards and olive groves, and the kind of quiet that makes you remember what peace feels like. We spent our days exploring medieval hill towns, our evenings on the terrace with wine and cheese, talking about everything and nothing. The hotel staff forwarded our mail. Among the congratulations cards was a thick envelope with Sarah's handwriting. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. "Dear Wendy, I know this letter is coming too late. You're already married and I wasn't there, and that's my fault. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness or to try to get invited to some future event. I'm writing it because I need to say these things, whether you ever speak to me again or not. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for taking that wedding money. I'm sorry for every comparison, every dismissive comment, every time I made you feel less than. I'm sorry for being so focused on what I was achieving that I never stopped to think about what I was destroying. Derek left me 2 weeks after that dinner at Morton's. He said he didn't want to deal with family drama. But the truth is, he saw what I was willing to do to my own sister, and it disgusted him. He was right to leave. I've spent the past 4 months in therapy, Wendy. Actually going, not just thinking about it. And I'm learning things about myself that are hard to face. I built my entire identity around being successful, by Dad's definition, being the good daughter, being impressive. And somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be a good person. I don't know if you'll ever want a relationship with me again, But I want you to know, I see you now. I see what I couldn't see before, that you were always the brave one. You chose your own path when I was too scared to do anything but follow the script. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. With love and genuine remorse, Sarah. I read the letter 3 times, then handed it to Marcus. He read it in silence, his expression thoughtful. When he finished, he folded it carefully and handed it back. How do you feel? I don't know, I admitted. We were sitting on the terrace, the Tuscan sunset painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Part of me wants to believe her. Part of me thinks it's too convenient, that she only apologized after facing consequences. Both can be true, Marcus said. She might genuinely be changing, and it might have only happened because she lost something she valued. I traced the edge of the letter with my finger. She's in therapy. That's good. Derek left her. That's complicated, Marcus said carefully. I'm not going to pretend I'm sorry he's gone, but I am sorry she had to lose something to start examining her behavior. Do I respond? Marcus reached over and took my hand. Not right now. Not on our honeymoon. When we get home, when you've had time to process, you can decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want with her. There's no timeline on forgiveness, Wendy. And there's no obligation either. I leaned my head on his shoulder. What would you do? I'd wait, he said. I'd give it time. I'd see if her actions match her words over the next 6 months, the next year. And then I'd decide. But that's me. You have to do what feels right for you. I don't want to be cruel, I said softly. You're not cruel. You're protecting yourself. There's a difference. We sat in silence as the sun sank lower, turning the vineyards copper and gold. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, clear and bright in the evening air. Whatever you decide, Marcus added, I support you. If you want to rebuild something with Sarah eventually, I'll be there. If you don't, I'll be there too. 6 months after our wedding, I stood in front of 23 women in a classroom at Jenna's nonprofit, about to teach my first workshop. Design your worth, building a creative business on your own terms. The room was full of women like I'd been, talented, uncertain, struggling to believe they could make a living doing what they loved, while people around them suggested they get real jobs. My name is Wendy Thorne, I began, and even saying my married name still gave me a small thrill. 5 years ago, my father asked me when I was going to get serious about my future. He didn't consider graphic design a real career, and for a long time, I believed him. I saw recognition in several faces. I'm not here to tell you that you'll all become millionaires doing what you love. That's not realistic, and it's not the point. I'm here to tell you that you can build a sustainable, meaningful career doing creative work, but first, you have to believe you deserve to. The workshop ran 3 hours. We covered pricing structures, client contracts, portfolio development, and marketing. But we also talked about imposter syndrome, about family pressure, about the difference between financial stability and financial approval. During the break, a young woman named Amy approached me. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. How did you stop caring what your family thought? I considered the question carefully. I didn't stop caring, I said finally. But I started caring more about what I thought. And I married someone who saw my worth even when I couldn't see it myself. That helped me learn to see it too. Do you regret choosing this path? She asked. Even with all the struggle? Not for a second, I said, and meant it completely. A year after that dinner at Morton's, Marcus and I sat on the balcony of our new apartment, a 2-bedroom in a building with actual amenities, still modest by his standards but luxurious by mine, and talked about the future. My design course had grown to over 500 enrolled students. Mom and I had coffee every other week. Sarah and I had exchanged a few careful emails, nothing deep yet, but civil, respectful. Dad still hadn't reached out. I'd stopped expecting him to. Do you regret it? I asked Marcus. The way you handled everything? Staying quiet for so long? He thought about it, swirling the wine in his glass. No, because if I'd revealed everything earlier, you wouldn't have seen them clearly. You would have always wondered if they might have treated you better if only you'd been more successful, or if only they'd known about me, or if only you'd explained better. Now you know the truth. Their treatment of you was never about your worth. It was about their values. That sounds lonely, I said softly. It was clarifying, he corrected. Lonely would have been spending your life trying to earn love that was conditional. Now you're free. He was right. I was free. Free to build my business my way. Free to choose my family, the people who saw me, valued me, loved me without requiring me to be someone else. Free to wake up every morning without that familiar weight of not being enough. Want to know something? I said. Always. I'm happy. Actually, genuinely happy. I don't think I've ever been able to say that before. Marcus smiled and pulled me close. Good. You deserve to be. If I could go back and talk to the version of myself sitting at that dinner table, silent, humiliated, drowning in shame she didn't deserve, I'd tell her this. You are not the problem. Their inability to see your value doesn't diminish your value. Their decision to measure worth by income and status and prestige says everything about them and nothing about you. You've spent 28 years trying to earn something that should have been given freely, and in a few minutes, the man sitting beside you is going to stand up and show everyone in that restaurant exactly who you're marrying, not because his success makes you worthy, but because his love finally helped you see that you always were. This story doesn't end with revenge, it ends with freedom. Freedom to choose yourself. Freedom to set boundaries with people who don't respect you, even when they're family. Freedom to build a life that reflects your values, not theirs. My father still hasn't apologized. Sarah and I are taking things slowly, one careful conversation at a time. My mother is learning, trying, showing up, and that's enough for now. But the real ending isn't about them. It's about me, sitting on this balcony with my husband, teaching workshops to women who need to hear that they're enough, running a business I'm proud of, living a life I chose. That's the ending that matters. And if you're reading this while sitting at your own version of that dinner table, feeling small and unseen and not enough, know this: you deserve better. You always did. And one day, you'll find the courage to choose yourself. That day might be today. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please leave a comment sharing your own experience with family boundaries. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family expectations? I'd love to hear your story. And if you found value in this, please like and subscribe. I share more stories about self-worth, healthy boundaries, and finding the courage to live authentically in the description below. Remember, you are enough. You always were. Until next time.